Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Awaken the World. This evening we present a live presentation, Habitual Discipline, live via the Awaken the World YouTube channel. It's 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Friday, May 4th, and it's so great to see you all. And I have that much faith that Jennifer is going to be here. Hello, Jennifer. I hope you had a wonderful day today, I really do. Haven't seen you since yesterday. Hopefully it's all been good stuff. I know that we've been busy as usual, although today, we did kind of slack off a little bit, worked on the desk we're making for our friend. Take some pictures of that soon. A little bit of staining here and there, a few other runabout things we had to do, just getting our handle on the list that we still have to complete. We are planning to go kayaking tomorrow morning for a few hours. It's going to be a nice break. Maybe a little garage sailing in there. So tonight we're going to talk about habits and discipline. And I gave the title of this Habitual Discipline. And, this is perhaps a really good subject because there are, as with all things, both the yin and the yang, but both the this guy and this guy in all things. Everything can be a weakness or a strength. You need hot to have cold, up and down. Yeah, it does sound fun. We're really looking forward to the kayaking, actually. It's we miss it when we don't go. That time out in nature. When we have not a lot of time, we go to a quiet little lake. It's a non-motor lake. The worst you see out there is some fishermen. And it's just a beautiful little protected spot. There's a couple islands you can go have lunch on. And we go kayaking, and the birds and the turtles are all over the place. And it's amazing. It really is. A good place to recharge Mother Nature. So speaking of habits, that would be a great habit to have, for example. So what do we really mean by habit? Because, this can be a little confusing for people. Well, if we're talking about psychology, a habit is a fixed way of thinking. And over time, it can become almost permanently fixed. It can be very hard to dislocate that habit, that fixed way of thinking. And you've heard me talk before about hacking paths through the jungle of your mind, right? Well, what happens is over time, we hack. Yeah, exactly. Hey, I love nature too, Jennifer. It's the best. And thankfully, Kelly loves it as well. And I have immersed her in it at every opportunity. As a matter of fact, she knows I am so much a tiger that if she doesn't get me into the woods once in a while, it's just not good. So the tiger gets dropped off in the forest sometimes for a day. Another way of thinking of habits, and this works right in with the psychological definition of habit, is... yes, true. Yes, I'm not sure what that word is, honey. Repetitive mental experience. That's another word for a habit. And these are pathways that we mostly unconsciously, and this is the big problem, we're not aware we're doing it most of the time. And we make these habitual trails. We find it easier to go down the habitual trail we've made in our head, Yeah, the tiger is my spirit animal, and I actually, and a lot of people don't believe me, and that's fine. They don't need to. Kelly's seen enough evidence of it herself. Occasionally I will revert to my tiger form. We were out at a cabin at the lake on Echo Lake, and there's this mountain, and it has a 45-degree scree rock slope filtered with trees, and nothing lives up there. It's too steep, it's too dangerous, and there are some caves way up there. No one's ever been up there in the 80 years that the place has been there. So I kayaked across the lake, and I simply transformed myself back into a tiger, and up the mountain I went. And it was as steep as people say. It really was. It was, you had to make leaps of 10, 12 feet sometimes from tree to tree in order to stay from sliding all the way back down the slope and having all that scree rock come with you. It was quite the experience. Actually, I loved it. I'm looking forward to doing it again, maybe next year. So we have these pathways in our head. We have these fixed ways of thinking, these repetitive mental experiences that we come back to over and over and over again. And really, habits are broken into three components. There is a cue or a trigger to the habit. And that may be perceived stress. It may be anger. It can be anything. Literally anything can be the trigger. And that's important to understand. The trigger is really the excuse for our habit. And we're happy to pick whatever trigger will work many times. And many times we do it subconsciously, okay? And when we're talking about habits here, we're not going to talk about the dangerous habits like drug addiction. Serious drug addiction, for example. With a drug like cocaine, which depending on your genetic disposition, you can become a lifelong addict with simply one hit. We're not going to talk about those things. We are talking about the habits that we form in our lives while maintaining a reasonable level of functionality outside of heavy drug addiction or alcohol addiction. That falls into the functional category of dysfunction, and we're going to talk about those separately. So this cue or trigger, it really becomes our excuse, and the cue or trigger, if it disappears, will be easily replaced by another one because the ego wants what it wants. And those pathways are very well made. Unconsciously. We've cleaned them right up. We made them easy to walk down, and we keep going back down them because the jungle looks too thick anywhere else. After the cue or the trigger is perceived, then the habitual behavior begins. Whether it's having a cigarette, having a piece of cake, having donuts, having candy, going for a walk. A lot of people can be triggered to have the habit of going for a walk, for example. Chocolate, another one. And then there's the reward for that behavior, okay? And the reward, of course, is in the form of how we feel. Now, here's the problem with the reward when it comes to habits that we find harmful to ourselves. That reward actually becomes less and less of a reward and more of a punishment. And we can tend to increase the habitual response instead of it decreasing because, egoically, unconsciously, we still want that reward. And that's exactly what happens with drug addiction, for example, where the reward is a feeling of a high. Same with food. That chocolate cake can taste really good until your tummy starts to hurt. Or until you realize you can't fit into that dress you wanted to wear or that pair of pants you wanted to put on. And then you begin to beat yourself up. And that reward is not so rewarding anymore. Now, we have a fair bit to go in this, and this is actually going to get really good. So keep this in mind. Automaticity. This is what happens when a habit is no longer conscious in any way. It is completely automatic. It is actually outside of our conscious range of knowledge most times. When automaticity is fully engaged, we literally become unaware of the habit we have. And you can witness people who have nervous twitches and other little habits that they're unconsciously doing, and they are unaware of it happening. And this can include binge eating. It can include binges of any sort, where the person is really not present as it is occurring. Now, this process takes 66 to 204 days, depending on who you are and how often you're feeding that habit, to reach that point where it becomes fully subconscious. You're fully asleep to that habit, and yet that habit exists in you. Those habits can go so deeply within us that we don't see them. And even though someone else may point them out on us, we, in our cognitive dissonance, refuse to see that habit. Our brain has literally become entrained. The physical aspect, not the mind, but the brain, the actual physical manifestation of that 8-pound chunk you have in your head there, has very specific paths dug in it that relate to your habit. They're physically there, and they are hard to change. Because, at a minimum, 66 to 200 days have gone by, and then on top of that, all the rest of the time has gone by until you actually finally become aware of it. And we're going to talk about how to deal with that, and how to actually turn it into a blessing in disguise. Hey, there's Devora. Nice to see you. I'm glad you're feeling better. Glad the food poisoning didn't get to you. Weren't eating any clams off that beach you were on, were you? I hope not. So, here's a good boom moment, okay? Habit equals discipline equals habit. Now, here's the really funny thing. If it's a habit, we typically think of habits as rather innocuous. We think of two different types of habits. Well, we have good habits and we have bad habits. But when we come up with the word discipline, what happens? Well, discipline even kind of feels bad. Right? As when we were young, we were disciplined for our behavior. When someone says it's going to take discipline to do something, we kind of go, not discipline, not that thing. I don't like that. What is discipline? Discipline is nothing more than a consciously formed habit. And it only stays in the discipline arena until such time as that automaticity occurs, which occurs sometime between day 66 and day 204 of your practice. Now, if you do a repetitive practice for 30 days, you are going, as we set out in the Awaken the World course, you are going to have profound effects. But those effects won't necessarily stick around unless you keep at it. And the longer you keep at it, the more you are entrenching it within your consciousness and quite physically within your brain, these patterns of behavior, these patterns that you want to follow. That's what discipline is. It is consciously forming a habit instead of allowing them to form unconsciously. And it's about being on guard for the habit formation that we don't want. We can use the power of the mind and the brain to form the habits we do want. We really can. And it's very simple. What we do is we set up the trigger, and we set up the behavior, and we set up the reward, all in alignment with what we are wishing to form as habitual habits for ourselves. Yeah, I know. Same with me. Skipping rope, mug being thrown through the air, dragged off the top bunk and dropped on the floor, scalded with boiling water in the tub. I remember those sort of disciplines. Doesn't feel good. But at the end of the day, discipline is not a bad word. Discipline is the act of using the brain to form a habit consciously. And it takes work. It takes conscious awareness. And we have to do that. So I'll give you an example of a consciously formed habit. You choose to get up and meditate every morning at 5 a.m. The first day you do it, and this is what you do. You set up a cue, and the cue will be the alarm. So when the alarm is triggered, you are going to take in a behavior, and the behavior is going to be meditation. So you will meditate. And you'll meditate for 20 minutes. And at the end of 20 minutes, you're going to give yourself a reward. Now, there's many ways to reward yourself, and you have to pick a meaningful reward that your ego, that your being in this conscious state that you're in, will be happy to have. So maybe you do it like this. If you meditate for 1 week straight, then you treat yourself to a 2-scoop ice cream on Saturdays, for example. You know, there used to be this place down in the San Juan Islands, across the border here. You could get there by ferry, and they had the best Italian-made blackberry gelato. It was this old Italian guy, and he made this homemade blackberry gelato from his own blackberry farm. And you could only get it, I think it was on either Shaw or Lopez, or maybe Orcas Island. And you'd have to take the ferry, and I tell you, that would be the reward for me to meditate at any time. So, you know, when people say they desire meditate or they desire discipline, what we really need to know is discipline is not something that you need to worry about desiring or worry about forming. Your brain is already fully set up for it. The issue, as always, is what we do unconsciously, and we're going to talk about that too. But for now, we have to understand that our brain we can use our brain to form the habits we want to form. So if Jennifer says I did that when I quit smoking. Excellent. So you must have had a cue, right? You wanted to have the cigarette, and then a behavior, you avoided the cigarette, and then a reward at some point for what you were doing. Yeah. Get 2 scoops on Saturday. Exactly. You know. So this is how we can use the power of the brain to form the habits we want. Stop thinking about it as discipline. It's not. You're doing a natural process that the brain does called brain entrainment, and you're going to do it consciously. You're going to take control of your own brain. And Jennifer, way to go. You know, because honestly, I still struggle with cigars. You know, not a lot, but I struggle with them. I do. I really do. Old military habit I developed a long time ago. So we can use the brain, as I said, to form these new habits. And the way we need to do it is to realize that it's going to take 66 to 204 days, depending on the level of awareness that we put into it. And habits always are formed the same way. Cue or trigger, behavior, reward. And you must follow that for 66 to 204 days. Don't consider it a discipline. Consider instead that you're being triggered to do something that will reward yourself. In this way, we form positive, good habits. In this way, we form the habits we want to have. You know, my wife and I love to walk, and the only way to do it is to set the alarm, use it as that trigger, get out of bed, go for a walk, and then have a baby-sized small ice cream cone later in the day because we had the walk. And it works. It really does. You know, we have to walk far enough, of course, to equal more than the ice cream is worth in calories. The problem with the whole thing, well, as soon as we say the word discipline, we really want someone else to do the work. You know, we don't want to actually do that work. We want to, you know, one of the reasons why so many people in the West go to gurus is they're hoping that if the guru touches them, they'll become enlightened and they won't have to do anything. Now, granted, there's a few that do exactly that from time to time, but only when the person's actually ready. There's a lot of pre-habit forming that has to go on. And no, it's 66 to 204 days, depending on the level of awareness you're putting into your new habit forming. There you go. Jennifer got herself something with the money she would have used buying cigarettes. Awesome. Yeah, that could get really fun really fast. Lots of new clothes. And the way I shop, I got to say, I'm wearing what I consider to be just a beautiful Guess shirt. It's a T-shirt. It's from the Guess store. It's just beautiful. The material is really soft. $3 at our secondhand store here, and it's like mint condition. I love it. Okay, now we come to the other part. Okay, breaking the bad, right? Breaking bad habits. The first thing to understand is it is not discipline in breaking a bad habit. It is self-love. And how to dress for under $50. Well, I don't know if they take Irish currency, honey. I don't think they take dollars. I think you have to use the real money. You'd figure for such a great piano player, her fingers would be a little more precise on the keyboard, but I guess not. Kelly is trying not to laugh out loud over here in the corner. She's trying so. Don't laugh, honey. Don't do it. She's trying so hard. Fingers are flying again. So when we're trying to break a bad habit, we have to understand that it is not discipline. It is self-love. When we recognize that we have unconsciously formed a bad habit, that we have unconsciously taken on a behavior that is doing ourselves harm and is destructive, we need... Yeah, exactly, hey? Way to go, Devorah. We need to give ourselves that self-love. And that's what it is. It's not discipline. Take that out of your mind. As we talked about before, our thinking and the way we perceive our thinking, and that is the way we feel about what we think, the way we think about what we think, and the feelings that it generates. Those are the true issues in life. Because life really is in the mind. It really is about perception. And what we're doing is we're working on changing perception. We're working on, taking the habits that we know no longer serve us. And keep in mind, when we say bad habit, don't beat yourself up. We're not talking about bad and good. We're talking about a habit that we find no longer serves us or does not serve us. There is no blame. There is nothing worse to keep a habit going than blame. Guilt, right? Or fear. Both of those things can keep habits on the go. As I said, beating yourself up equals more habit. The more you beat yourself up over your habit, the more that habit's going to magnify. What you have to do instead, and this sounds counterintuitive, but you have to accept that there is a habit there. You have to understand that even though you are unconsciously doing it, and maybe sometimes consciously, that without you being totally aware, there is now a perfectly cleared out path from point A to point B in your brain. And that path is going to take that same 66 to 204 days to totally grow over. And when it comes to addictive substances, you can be at risk for years and years and years afterwards. You really can. What we need to do then is understand and simply replace the bad habit with a new habit that is in alignment with what we're trying to produce. New perceptions, new life. Exactly. Stop going down the street with the hole. That's right. Right? Sooner or later we have to take responsibility for it, and that does not mean beating ourselves up. And what it really means is starting to love yourself again. And if you're beating yourself up, you're not loving yourself. If you're blaming yourself, you're not loving yourself. Love yourself enough to look and see the habits that no longer serve you and choose new habits, choose new cues. You can even keep the same cue if it helps and make a new habit. a breathing exercise, or 5 minutes of yoga, or taking a walk every morning, or doing meditation every morning. Taking a day for yourself once a month to get out and be just by yourself in nature. Whatever sort of habits are going to assist you and help you, use the mind's ability to form a habit to your advantage. Use it consciously to form the habits you want in your life, and stay against. And it takes work. Contrary to popular belief, it is not willpower that fixes a habit. It's acceptance. It's the acceptance of the habit and understanding the cues and the behavior and the reward system, and making choices out of self-love to move past it. And we are all capable of this. And meditation a big help. The more awareness we can place into things, the more we become aware, the easier it is to see those things in ourselves which no longer serve, and begin to make real positive change. Now, we always have to kind of come back to this point. Again, as with most things in life, anything that we wish to deal with is really a case in seeing it for what it is. We too often equate our habit with our sense of self, our egoic sense of self. You're beating yourself up over it, for example, or you're feeling guilty all the time, or you're feeling you don't look pretty anymore, or you don't look muscular enough anymore because of your eating, or whatever the case may be. Those things will lead to more of those negative habits forming. You need to reverse that. And the only way to reverse that, I mala my mala. I really do. Call them whatever sort of beads you want. My mala is actually made of the little tiny bark bowls from the Bodhi tree. They're actually little kind of bowly shaped things. They're nifty, actually. I really like it. It was a beautiful, beautiful mala. Actually, I had that mala. I bought that mala when I met Kelly. She was at a convention at a hotel that I was speaking in for the weekend, a spiritual convention. It was interesting, actually. It was a lot of fun. It was a nice time for us. That was kind of like a little bit of a honeymoon. So again, let's just be clear on everything, okay? Habits and discipline and habits, all the same thing. We're talking about the same sort of thing. A habit is something that we tend to form unconsciously, whereas a discipline is something that we form consciously. And a lot of us don't, because as soon as we hear the word discipline, we react to that. What you're doing is you're looking to love yourself. It is not discipline. You want to get into the habit of loving yourself. And as Jennifer said, a great idea that you can do is to change that cue, reward, behavior system around to suit you. And start loving yourself, and you will see in the course of 2 to 6 months these new habitual patterns begin to become entrained into you until they reach a point where they're just automatic. And at that point, you totally can let them go. We are energetic beings, as we've discussed before, and a great way to help depersonalize, to get rid of this sense of my habit, because it's really not your habit. It's been entrained in the body's field. But consciously, you're actually separate from that. And another way to see the habits that we have is to see them for what they are, and that is an energy body. Every time we perform the habit, we're feeding the energy dysfunctional body of that habit, and that energy is staying within our vibrational energy field. Bringing your conscious awareness onto that habit, even for a few moments before succumbing to it, can be a great way to over time help reduce that habit. to help break that cycle. And it takes time. You have to give yourself time, and you can't beat yourself up. Remember, most of us have spent years and years and years unconsciously forming harmful habits. We just have. Give yourself a break. If it takes a year to get yourself back on track, or 2 years or 5 years, in the span of the 40, 50, or 60 years you may have been here, that's really not a lot of time. And as far as the benefits in your life, it's certainly worth the effort to love yourself. That's really where we're going to wrap it up tonight. This has kind of been an extra edition that we wanted to do on the Friday. We're next going to see everyone Sunday morning on the Help Awaken at 10 a.m. and then on the Awaken the World Sunday live Q&A at 1 p.m. And at 1 p.m. we're going to be talking about alien civilizations, highly advanced cultures, where I fit in with that, where you fit in with that, and a bunch more of really interesting things to discuss. So hopefully we'll see you there. Much love, namaste. As always, we love seeing you. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and we hope, as always, that this little video on habitual discipline will be helpful. Exactly. It really is about loving yourself, Jen. And you know what? We love you all too. Our brothers and our sisters out there, our fellow humans here having this human experience. You know, you're all powerful spiritual beings, and we have an amazing future together. We really do. Even if you have to wear the shades. Have a wonderful night. Namaste.